This is the Indiana Department of Education's ESSER Gear dashboard. You can get this on the IDOE's website. It shows various COVID funding and grant amounts. ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, also called GEAR. This is money the federal government gave to schools across the country to address the impact of COVID-19. The deadlines for ESSER 1 and GEAR have already expired. The deadline for ESSER 2 is now less than 2 weeks away. September 30th is what's called the encumbrance deadline. That means that's the deadline of which all approved activities have to be completed. Right now, schools are scrambling to get all that money spent. In Goshen,
the funding's been appropriated. We know what we're spending it on.
Bob Evans, the chief financial officer, says,
yes, there's funding that has not been expended yet.
But it has been.
It's been appropriated, it's been planned for. We know what we're spending it on.
He says there will be no money left on the table. On the state's COVID dashboard, it shows the district has spent all of its ESSER 1 and GEAR funds. But with 2 weeks left until that September 30th deadline, you can see there are still $3.4 million left in the district's ESSER 2 fund.
Right now, we have planned it all down to the penny.
There is a bit of a delay in the DOE's dashboard, but there is also another deadline. While the encumbrance deadline is September 30th, the reimbursement deadline is not until December 15th. So you may not see these funds disappear until after that deadline. So as of right now, you don't think there will be any money left on the table for ESSER 2?
No, there will not be any money.
In Elkhart, a similar story. You can see the district has zero funds left in its ESSER 1 and GEAR funds. Those deadlines are passed. But it still has $400,000 in its ESSER 2 fund.
We are down to the final activity on that. We have our plan, and we'll make sure that we fully spend that by December.
We spoke over the phone to the Elkhart Community Schools CFO. They say the remaining ESSER $2 have been spent, and the change left over will be billed to the DOE as indirect costs like payroll and staffing expenses.
That is correct. We've had a plan, we've executed the plan, and we will get to the end in good fashion.
There are other schools in our area that appear to still have money waiting. PHM has around $270,000 left over. South Bend has about $10 million. We asked South Bend schools about their leftover cash. We've not heard back. But in an interview last year, the district told us it had planned to spend most of its ESSER $2 in 2022. And now for ESSER 3, you can see $900 million still in that fund statewide. So that was the largest pot of money given to schools across the country in COVID aid. Now in Indiana, schools still have until September of next year to spend that money and until December of next year to get reimbursed for that money. Coming up on Wednesday in Operation Education, what our area schools spent some of their COVID funding on. In the newsroom, Kristen Bean, WSBT 22 News. This is the Department of Education's COVID funding dashboard. It shows the amount of funds schools received and what still needs to be spent. You can see in ESSER 2, schools in the state still have $106 million left to spend. The deadline for that spending is September 30th, 10 days away. At Goshen Community Schools.
Right now, we have planned it all down to the penny.
Whitney Dixon is the director of finance and a parent of a school-aged child.
As a parent, I've been really pleased with the curriculum that we're utilizing here at Goshen and seeing how much growth happens in a short amount of time. And it's made me realize the impact of taking those kids out of that in-person relationship that just can't be replaced.
Dixon also knows how important those COVID emergency dollars from the federal government have been to get kids back in school, caught up, and learning safely.
And it was a lot of money at one time where everybody had to kind of rush to plan what they were doing with it.
Goshen was allocated about $12 million total in federal COVID funds. It's used up every dollar by the deadline for the first 2 rounds of funding. But a state IDOE dashboard shows Goshen Schools still has about $3.4 million to spend before next week's deadline. and another $6.9 million before next year.
Our plan has not really changed, really focusing on, the learning loss piece of COVID and bringing those kids back into school and working with them to address that learning loss.
While the district has used some of the money for equipment and facilities upgrades, Dixon says the majority of Goshen's COVID money has been spent on instruction, things like programming, professional development, and curriculum. Goshen's chief financial officer says all the district's COVID money will be spent.
Yes, there's funding that has not been expended yet.
But it has been.
It's been appropriated, it's been planned for. We know what we're spending it on.
Next door to Goshen in Elkhart,
You can see on slide 3, Kristen,
we spoke to the Elkhart Community Schools chief financial officer over the phone, who says the district is not leaving any money behind.
we've had a plan, we've executed the plan, and we will get to the end in good fashion.
The IDOE dashboard shows Elkhart was allocated more than $41 million in COVID emergency funds. While it has about $400,000 left to spend before the December 30th deadline, there's $13 million that needs to be spent before next year's deadline.
I know these projects will be able to be completed by next summer, well in advance of the deadline. And so at this point, we're awaiting Department of Ed approval so that we can move forward.
The district has spent a large portion of COVID dollars on instruction, teacher salaries, and benefits. Nearly $7 million was spent on major facilities projects like heating and cooling work at several of its schools. Elkhart school leaders say they have a plan for the rest of the money, and it will be spent in time.
We are down to the final activity on that. We have our plan, and we'll make sure that we fully spend that by December.
Elkhart is requesting that it spend about $6 million on roofing projects. Leaders say part of the problem with budgeting for those types of projects is supply chain issues. I'll put a link to this dashboard on our website at WSBT.com. In the newsroom, Kristen Bean, WSBT 22 News.